we have a hard time, the amygdala controls our emotional center, right? We can influence our emotional center, right? Indirectly, but we don't have, just like our cardiovascular system, we can hold our breath. We can't stop our heart from beating, but you can influence your heartbeat through your breath, right? The brain works the same way. I can influence my amygdala through my prefrontal cortex in terms of how I deliberately affect that. So there's an indirect correlational relationship between that. But the key thing is, like, if you control how you think consciously and you control how you respond, the likelihood that you're going to get that flywheel effect in motion is going to be more likely, versus if you just leave it to chance. You could have a doom loop scenario where you just flush yourself down the toilet. Psychological momentum works in your favor, and that's a fundamental concept. So I like to describe that psychological momentum because it helps people really understand the relationship between the cognitive aspect, which is your attitude, your conscious thoughts, and your emotions, which is part of how you feel.
Welcome to the EQ Gangster podcast, where you will learn practical tools to grow your mental and emotional health and intelligence to be the best version of yourself, both at work and at home. It is real, raw, and transformational. The journey of emotional growth isn't easy, but it's worth it. I believe in you. EQ Gangsters, I am super stoked to chat with our guest today. He is bad to the bone. This guy, Andy, is who I want to be when I grow up, man. This guy, he is awesome. So, retired lieutenant colonel. He is an Army football player. So, played for West Point, Army football player. Amazing story there. He has developed a truckload of leader development, optimal human performance programs for special forces, for professional sports teams. I'll let him kind of share his background and stuff like that. This guy, I'm telling you, y'all, he is bad to the bone. And I'm stoked. I can't wait to learn. We've been hanging out already for almost 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and it has been fire. So, Andy, thank you so much, brother, for taking some time to invest in the audience today and sharing your insights on optimal human performance, brother.
Great to be with you, Noble, and your audience out there too. And go Army, beat Navy, man.
That's right. Awesome. Okay, so can you share, like, how did you get this bug for optimal human performance?
Yeah, I mean, it really all starts back in our Rockbound Highland home at West Point. For me, I'd really gone through a lot of, grew up in a great family environment in Northern California. Loved the outdoors. I was in scouts. I was in sports quite a bit, and my math grades weren't that great. So I went to the prep school. By the year that you graduated, this really kind of started to struggle. I was doing well football wise, and on English was my strength, but just the math and sciences were really a struggle for me too. And so I didn't initially get in, and I wasn't planning on going to West Point. And by all accounts, I was going to graduate, but I wasn't going to move on to West Point. I didn't get my appointment to move on because my math grades weren't quite good enough. The story is, yeah, I had to take my final, and I had to get a 80 in order to be able to be academically qualified. I got like a 78. Well, I don't know what happened, but the day of graduation, I got kind of my stay of execution, I guess. I got my golden ticket to go to West Point, and still don't know how that ended up happening. And so I went to West Point, but then really kind of the uphill battle just continued. My sophomore year, I switched positions. So I was a fullback. I was on offense. They tried to switch me to defense. Of course, your Yearling year is well known as being the yuck year because it sucks. And just my coach thought I was struggling mentally, and I had all the physical tools to play and do well, but just was struggling between the ears, and so it sent me to the West Point Center for Enhanced Performance, which in 1989 is where sport and performance psychology came into the U.S. military, which is today the largest employer of sports psychologists in the world. But it's very early that time, and so I worked one-on-one with an Army officer who had got his master's degree in sports psychology. Shout out to Carl Olson. And we started working to learn about mental toughness, learn about confidence by setbacks, and how to be composed under stress, and how to concentrate amidst distractions, how to use motivation and discipline to my advantage, how to be goal oriented, all those things. And, that helped me survive and get through. And I was like 2-0 go guy. And, really I was probably voted most likely to not stay 5 years, let alone, for me, it was about, if I'm being honest, it's about going to playing ball and, paying back my time and then moving on. And 9/11 happened and everything changed for my classmates, people who served during that time. We then went from peacetime to wartime. And now all of a sudden the stakes were all higher. 2003, I'm 25 years old, on the Thunder Run I was an artillery officer for 20 years, but this is where I cut my teeth into combat for the first time, leading a convoy across the deserts of Iraq, getting to Baghdad, and, and then just encountering a lot of what we call VUCA operating environments. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And, really quickly realized that combat's a thinking person's game, and my mental game that I had trained as a cadet and as an athlete really started to carry the day. And so when we redeployed, and everything, the way that we trained to be able to increase our readiness had changed. And I knew that, hey, I had this ability to bring this set of skills into myself, this mental emotional skills, to help me be a better leader and take care of my soldiers. But I didn't really know how to teach that to my soldiers or train it. I didn't. And it turns out there were a lot of our classmates, leaders around that time. So they started reaching back to West Point to bring those skills out to the Army to help them with their pre-deployment training. That was where the Army Center for Enhanced Performance was born. And long story short, after my second deployment, I was a combat advisor to the Iraqi Army. 15 months away, I missed the birth of my son, saw a lot of combat, been going through a lot of personal adversity, so and again, there's this endless cycle of deployments. So it's 10 years in, 5 years, way longer than I planned on staying. And my wife is like, hey, let's, supposed to go to Fort Campbell and take an artillery battery and deploy again. And my wife's like, no, let's find another assignment to pull off on the roadside of life and figure things out, and then figure out what our next move is, most likely getting out of the Army. And so, as luck would have it, your classmate, Doug Chadwick, shout out to him, reached out to me. He was back as the deputy director of the CEP, the Center for Enhanced Performance. Was looking for former Army football players interested to come back without getting their master's degree, which is usually tied with Army officers who go teach at the academies, usually go spend 2 years going to get their master's degree. This was a direct fill assignment, meaning I would just go straight there and help run the Army Center for Enhanced Performance, which was growing, as it would find out. And lo and behold, that same captain, Carl Olson, was now Lieutenant Colonel Carl Olson, PhD, and now the SEP director. And he remembered me when I was a football player. And so it just really kind of sent me on this journey. I fell in love with teaching. And then 2009, when I got there, we're now we're in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're deep into that fight, and we're losing most soldiers to their own hands, killing themselves, and we're dying and being killed in action. So our national leaders were poking our military leaders in the chest saying, what are you going to do about this? And so they brought together the existing military programs that were, had everything to do with mental health and wellness. And then the best and brightest minds from academia. And so it centered around the University of Pennsylvania's resilience program, which, giants like Dr. Martin Seligman, was there. Karen Rivich, who developed the resilience program. And so we developed the Army's resilience program. I ended up becoming one of the, first Army resilience trainers. And then kind of in a roundabout way, kind of ended up fell into becoming a pioneer in health and human performance within the military. And that would stay with me in my time with Special Forces, working with them, helping develop their elite tactical athlete programs, and then in my time beyond the military. So that's my burning question has always been, it started off with, to answer your question directly, circle background was like, hey, I've always been fascinated by, like, under pressure, why do some people rise to the occasion and become gamers and ball out, and why do some people choke? And I always saw myself as a gamer, right? When the lights are on, the brightest, and the pressure's on, like, I like to step up. I loved it, and I was always a competitor. But then it became, hey, how do I, from a leadership perspective, then it became, how can we develop the intangibles of leadership? to help individuals and teams perform better, and become better decision makers. And I saw how these skills translated to so many different areas and arenas of life and it wasn't mainstream, right? There was still a ton of stigma. And so it kind of became this idea of like, I wanted to democratize mental fitness. And that still is part of and it wasn't what I said at that time, but that's become my larger mission, my ministry in life is to figure out how do we train our brains like our bodies and our crafts so we can win from within.
Wow. Andy, I am so stoked, dude. I love that. And dude, the analogy that you said is so powerful because like I have been both, I've choked, and
Yeah,
there have been times where I've like, oh, I crushed it in the heat of the moment. So I've been both of those guys, right? And
absolutely.
and so, oh, dude, so that's so resonates. And then like I love what you said too. It's like not only from an individual perspective, but also as a leader. Like what
Yeah,
happens if you're a leader? Like what
yeah,
determines whether you rise or you choke, right? In a leadership position where the
that's right.
consequences are so much greater, right? In
That's
that
right.
scenario. What percentage, okay, let me ask it this way. What is the relationship
Yeah.
between the mental game and the emotional game?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so it's a bit of an academic kind of discussion too, because it was interesting. 'Cause I've looked at different health and human performance models that look at the domains of the human dimension, right? And so, I mean, we've looked at the whole person or holistic health and wellness and fitness. Like it's been around since the beginning of mankind, arguably, right? And I'm sure you've talked to previous guests like Sarah Spradlin, and I geek out about this, right? So I think I tend to when you talk about of the mind, right? I tend to bring in the cognitive and emotional skills that are related to self-awareness and self-regulation. Those are I group them together. So if you were to look at my model, like Andy, what's your model? Because I don't believe you need to train your mental game in isolation. It's because it's intangible. It's best to be brought to life using an interdisciplinary approach to where you're training your mind while you're doing something physically, you're doing something socially because you're getting the opportunity to actually see the results through your behaviors, how you think and how you behave. What are the results of that? And so in sports, it's like, okay, that's not only most of that's during training and preparing to play the game, but you see the results during the game, they either help you or hurt you, whatever, right? Um, but from my perspective, and I'd be curious to see what you think, I tend to group them together, but for the military in like Total Force Fitness, which is the DoD's initiative, they broke it up into two separate domains. So I think it's really an academic discussion, but when I talk about, I don't discern or distinguish between mental and emotion. I kind of say it's of the mind.
Love it, love it. Well, it's and that's reassuring to me because for me, just in my own journey, I do jujitsu. I'm
Cool.
almost 8 years into combat cuddling
Yeah,
and
yeah.
scrubbing
Combat
styles.
cut. That's awesome, man. I know the belts are weird. Where are you at belt wise? That takes a long time.
I'm a purple belt.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So my first 4 years, I was still getting beat up by men, women, and children, and now, fortunately, I'm slowly improving, slowly improving. But to your point, right? Is it's given me a real world daily application for me. The better I get at increasing my awareness of my emotions
Yeah,
and my ability to manage, process, and regulate my emotions,
that's
the
right.
better my mental game is.
That's right. That's
Right.
you're
So for
exactly
me,
right.
it's they
Yeah.
go hand in hand for me.
Yeah. They go hand in hand. And I think when you
Okay.
look at like just to break this down, like so you look at psychological momentum, right? And this kind of goes back to cognitive behavioral therapy and Albert Ellis, great example. He's one of the godfathers of psychology. He developed this ABC model that I'll kind of break down. And so if you look at it in any situation, right? Let's say you're doing combat cuddling, right? Whether it's you're practicing, you're just rolling, or you're getting ready to do a match. I forget what they call the competition piece of it, right?
Yep. Yep.
But then you have in that situation, you have how you think, both as conscious and unconscious, which then affects how you feel, which you could break that down into physiology, your physiological response with your nervous system, your gas and brake system, which is well There's like a million TED Talks on that. Go Google it about the fight, flight, or freeze, or the rest, digest, and poop, puke, or pee, whatever. That's the gas. I call that your nervous system, gas and brake system, the physiology. But how you feel is a combination of your emotions, which is being happy, sad, glad, whatever it is, and then your physiological response. That's how you feel. That affects how you behave, what you do or don't do, right? How you respond, and then that loops into the situation and how you think, and then that psychological momentum is a very real thing that's happening like this, and that can help you or hurt you, right? But the only thing you control within that cycle is how you think and how you respond. You can influence how you feel, but a lot of the research, and neuroscience and psychology has shown that we have a hard time, the amygdala controls our emotional center, right? We can influence our emotional center, right? Indirectly, but we don't have, just like our cardiovascular system, we can hold our breath, we can't stop our heart from beating, but you can influence your heartbeat through your breath, right? The brain works the same way. I can influence my amygdala through my prefrontal cortex in terms of how I deliberately affect that. So there's an indirect correlational relationship between that. But the key thing is, like, if you control how you think consciously and you control how you respond, the likelihood that you're going to get that flywheel effect in motion is going to be more likely, versus if you just leave it to chance, you could have a doom loop scenario where you just flush yourself down the toilet. Psychological momentum works in your favor, and that's a fundamental concept. So I like to describe that psychological momentum because it helps people really understand the relationship between the cognitive aspect, which is your attitude, your conscious thoughts, and your emotions, which is part of how you feel.
Man, that is awesome. And my audience is there. Well, if they're still, whoever sticks around knows that I talk about jujitsu in a lot of my EQ lessons.
Sure. Yeah.
Because because it combines all those, right? It combines the mental,
Absolutely.
the emotional, and the physical, and the
That's right.
physiological, right?
Yeah.
And so I got a guy who's probably mid-40s who just sent me a Marco Polo message on, it's a video message. Anyway, he said, Noble, I'm going to start jujitsu with my son. Can you tell me what to expect? And I said, bro, I tell this to white belts. Every white belt that rolls with me knows I am the breath guy, right? Everyone knows, like, Noble's the breathing guy. I'm like, because how does a 50-year-old guy with a dad bod be able to roll with the 25-year-old animals that bench press 400 pounds and squat 800 pounds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're Division I wrestlers. The only way that I can survive amongst those guys
Yeah.
is my breathing.
That's right. Yeah.
And I tell them, look, when I listen to your breathing and listen to my breathing, I breathe through my nose the entire round,
Yeah.
which enables my thinking to stay calm.
That's
I
right.
said, because you will perform
Yeah.
according to your breathing. So if your
Yeah.
breathing is spazzy, your performance will be spazzy.
That's right.
If you breathe calmly, your
Yeah.
performance will be calm and thoughtful.
Yeah.
I've got 100 options I can do because my thinking is calm and open,
Yeah.
because my breathing is calm. You have one or two options because you're going through fight, flight, freeze, right?
Yeah.
Kind of
That's
a deal.
right.
Is that right? Am I saying that
Yeah.
right?
The breath is really one of the gateways to self-regulate, to connect the mind and the body, right? And you've heard this a million times. Hey, it's like putting on your own oxygen mask, if the plane's going down, right? But really what the breath allows you to do is to control, to amp yourself up, or amp yourself down. Because sometimes the breath can help us get our physiology up to where we're maybe, we're not where we need to be in terms of our energy and attention levels. Well, the breath can help us with that. Like, you've heard about Wim Hof breathing and all that stuff too, but it also can help us down regulate, to be able to get in that sweet zone where we can be at our best, right? And so the breath is the gateway to all of that. It's really the way, the lever to be able to access your gas and brake system of your nervous system.
Love that. Love that. Here's another. I want to see how this hits you. Another thing that I like to do. So I used to do it after I do jujitsu. Now I'm starting to do it before. Is cold plunge. I cold plunge. I've got a
Yeah.
cold. My wife got it for me for my birthday.
Yeah.
That's another great. And I try to do 10 minutes. And it's a very, now it took me a while to get here, but it's a very calming experience for me
That's
now.
right.
But initially,
Yeah.
I'm my breathing is quick, right? And I'm like, okay, no, just calm down,
Yep.
just relax, right? Calm my
Yep.
breathing down, right?
Right.
Calm down. And now I've gotten to the point where now I don't even shiver anymore,
Yep. Yeah.
which is another. It feels like a win. I don't think that shivering is bad necessarily, but
Sure.
but in terms of like physiological control,
That's right.
right? Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so what's happening there to break that down, is that you're increasing your vagal tone, right? Which is kind of like your it's called the wandering nerve, right? So I talked about your nervous system. One of the main superhighways of your nervous system is called the vagus nerve, right? And it goes from you're seeing that water boy, the medulla oblongata. That's where it's really a part of your brain. It's where it starts, and it goes all the way down through your neck, all the way down to your gut. So that's really we hear about the gut brain axis. This is the superhighway. It's called the vagus nerve. So that's really the key thing. And so when you increase your vagal tone, what happens when you use extreme temperatures, right? So cold plunges, obviously using cold water immersion is like a form of immersion therapy, right? There's a lot of science behind this. So when you're doing cold water immersion, or you go to a sauna, whether it's wet or hot sauna, whatever, the extreme temperatures, what you're doing, is that you're exercising your vagus, you're using exercise your vagus nerve, right? And so when you're increasing your vagal tone, especially when you add in multipliers like breathing exercises and self-talk and all these other things in you too, what ends up happening is that you're increasing your pain tolerance, right? So it increases your threshold for stress, which is incredibly important. And for elite athletes, very, very important because especially football players, why you go to any NFL training room, they've got cold plunge and hot plunge, and they've got all kinds of cryotherapy and all this stuff too, because it's proven that, hey, it helps them not only for recovery, but also helps them to, become anti-fragile in terms of their being injured versus the perception of injured versus hurt, right? And so if you have a low stress and pain tolerance, right? Hey, if you just think like you're injured, you're like, man, I can't play. So you're wondering like why one of my favorite examples, Ronnie Lott. I mean, Ronnie Lott, man, he broke his finger and they had a playoff game, like just cut it off, right? I mean, you would never see that happen in today's game. Players just aren't willing to sacrifice their bodies that way. But over the course of a 18 game season, playing 17 games, it takes its toll on you physically. There's a high physical demand. You think of the collisions of these massive human beings. They're the biggest, strongest, fastest people in the world. It takes its toll on your body. So your recovery is at a premium. And so when you're able to exercise your vagal tone, you not only increase your physical tolerance for stress, but you also increase there's a mental and emotional component that's built into it that I would argue accelerates that your ability to increase your vagal tone.
Man, that's excellent. That was excellent, Andy. How does food affect our gut brain connection and ultimately our performance and even ability to think, manage emotions, process emotions,
Oh yeah.
sugar versus, eating
Yeah.
healthy, right? How does that affect us?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's you know, a gut is a little bit different, right? In turn, so this is again the nutrition piece is not my area of expertise, but it's fascinating to me in my journey. Having a coach who coached me on this and looking at the gut brain access is understanding the gut microbiome. So where all of our gut microbiomes are a little bit different, and when you understand that vagus nerve I described to you, we actually think there's a second brain in your gut. So that helps with your emotions, right? And so what you eat, when they say you are what you eat or you feel how what you eat, it literally is true, right? So there's both a reaction from that mentally in terms of like you heard about comfort food or what do you like to eat when you're under stress? Because some people's coping mechanism, I know that I do that sometimes. I've had ADD my entire life, and so like drinking a lot of coffee too much, before I got diagnosed with sleep apnea or consuming, I'm not a big sugar guy, but those types of things affect your gut, and your gut affects, your mental and emotional state as well too, right? Which affects your decision making. And so I think, and there's a whole kind of understanding the gut microbiome is a whole nother whole nother thing. Like I'd recommend if you're interested in that, and you can afford it. Excella is a really great way. They give you like a whole markup. They get you a coach. It blew my mind. All that stuff too, because not everybody has a nutritionist like we have with the Bears, for example. But just understanding things like FODMAP, like go Google FODMAP. Every food has a FODMAP, and when there's certain things to where your gut, microbiome reacts to certain things, so like you eat sriracha on everything. If you put your sriracha on your sriracha like I do, then hey, you're really jacking yourself up, and so you're gonna have, especially if you're the type of person who has indigestion or has irritable bowel syndrome or things like that too, like just getting your gut microbiome, you're never going to be at homeostasis, but getting that aligned and dialing that in really has a huge impact, not only in your physiological state, but in terms of like, how you think and how you feel.
That's awesome. That was awesome. What have you found, Andy, being an elite performance? I work with a lot of corporate
Yeah.
executives who are elite performers. What have you found to be okay? I got a kind of a series of questions here.
Yeah.
Some of the biggest obstacles of elite human performance. Let's start with that one.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the biggest obstacles? I think number one is never having dealt with adversity, true adversity, right? I think that may be unique to people who have incredible talents, right? And so that's a really interesting thing. And it's something like I look at like in the NFL draft, right? Is that, not only through psychological evaluations, it's more objective, but through subjective interviews, I tend to think it's someone who hasn't gone through some sort of personal or professional adversity earlier in their career because they've just been the most physically dominant or, talented person on the field. Inevitably, life in the game is going to humble you at the world class level when you're dealing with a grown ass men and women. You're going to be able. So, like, if you don't have the coping skills already to be able to deal with that challenge, change, and adversity, you're going to get punched in the mouth, and you may have a hard time. Some people never recover from that, right? And so that's a huge challenge, right? Um, as well too. I think there's a lot of people. I would argue there's a confidence crisis in our country right now. I think there's people who have a very limiting beliefs. They're constantly comparing themselves because of social media. There's a fear of missing out. They're constantly looking at all these other distractions that are out there. And so they're very focused on themselves versus the team. It tends to be too, because everybody's also worried about their brand and their image and the so on and so forth, right? And I think that what's ended up happening is that when you have someone who's never really failed and someone who has low confidence, that's a really a recipe for disaster. And I think the last piece is then just the pressure to perform and be consistent, right? Because from my perspective, mental toughness is getting the most out of what you have to be at your best when it matters the most, right? And there's a psychological offense and a psychological defense, and then I call the leadership aspect and character development, like the special teams of what I teach, right? But I think fundamentally, when the pressure's on, their livelihoods are at stake, and it's at the elite levels, as you move up, that hey, it's you can have a great game, and just about anybody can be in the zone or flow state that's well researched and well talked about when things go their well, right? But hey, when you have your C game for whatever reason, because your competition, you just don't feel well, maybe you're sick, you're injured, whatever it is, you're just not 100%, right? I mean, some people just fold the tent and just cash it, just that and alone, right? But I think what difference between good, great, elite, world class performers in any industry, any arena is the difference is how do I get when I have my C game, how do I get a C plus? Right? How do I squeeze every bit of juice out of myself mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, spiritually to get the most out of what I have, to perform optimally. That's what I talk about. That's the true measure of mental toughness. Physical toughness, I would argue as well too, is that because that consistency is the hardest part, and the consistency under pressure when day in day out, that is the true measure of champions.
Awesome. Wow. Awesome, Andy. Okay, so So based on that, so we talked about kind of the obstacles, and you laid out some great obstacles there. What have you found to be some consistently effective
Yeah.
tools
Yeah.
to help overcome some of those common obstacles that you've seen in some of those elite athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that just any that as you're going out there, and you're talking to anybody who has a sport performance psychology background, right? And you kind of look at the bridge of mental fitness. It's a psychology continuum. You get on the left hand side of the bridge is mental health. That's surviving, right? It's like we've all been there, right? Where we're barely getting by. Maybe we're feeling down or depressed, or we've gone through some sort of significant life event. And you got fired, maybe you got a divorce, you got broke up, whatever it is. That's when you want to go get help. It's the medical model of solving problems. In the middle is the coping band, where we spend most of our life. And the antidote to that is how to do with resilience and grit. Resilience is bouncing back from adversity. Grit is passion and perseverance over time. Because just because you're resilient, you can bounce back doesn't mean you're going to thrive and get stronger. Grit's kind of the accelerant to be able to move towards the performance band, which is when you're thriving. When you're, again, talking about you're in that zone at the upper range of your potential, but maybe you're just having a great day and kicking ass and you're feeling awesome and you're just, you had a really good day, right? The reality we spend, like scale of 1 to 10, 1 being surviving, barely holding on, 10 being like having my best day ever. We're kind of we live our life somewhere between 5 and 7, right? With where we're at, right? So that kind of goes back to kind of put the skills that I deal with to bucketize that, right? And then, so I think, and then there's a before, during, and after to every single performance. So the time and place matters as well too, just to put this in context. But the top 5 skills that any sport and performance psychology practitioner, not provider, so a coach like me provides is like it's self-talk, right? I mean, that's huge. As far as the narrative, what you tell yourself, the story, what you tell yourself, tapping into your belief system, into your motivational system is incredibly important. So self-talk is one of them, all day, every day, as far as that's concerned too. Another one is attention control, and that's understanding, hey, where do I put, my attention is like a weapon system. How do I put my attention on target when I get distracted? How do I get it back on target? How do I have situational awareness? How do I have concentration and intense focus? How do I get introspective when I need to? Your attention works like a flashlight. So how do you control that flashlight, whether it's broad, narrow, internal, external, is incredibly important. And the way you do that is a whole bunch of different techniques, but I focus right now on like developing habits and routines. And those can be macro game week routines. Those can be morning routines. That be go to bed routines. That could be things that you do in between sets in the weight room, or how do you show up with intentionality when you're getting your prehab or rehab, all of those things, I'm huge on habits and routines, as well too. Another one's goal pursuit. That could be as simple as like, hey, what's my intention for today, and what are the attitudes and behaviors that I'm going to show up with to be able to accomplish that one thing I need to accomplish today. And it could be huge and extrapolated towards like I'm going to do this big, hairy, audacious goal. Like when I was, like before, I've been into endurance sports. When I trained for a marathon or I trained for a half Ironman, going against John McCaskill, right? It's this whole idea of where I use a 4-phase approach where I plan, prepare, execute, and assess. And so start with the end in mind as far as what the destination is, figure out where I'm at now. I develop some priority areas of what I need to work on, what are my strengths, and then I go start executing that. I assess my progress along the way. I develop a team around it. I celebrate the wins. I mitigate the losses. So like goal pursuit is one of those things. It's like it can be very huge and long and drawn out, but it could be very small. So goal pursuit is very common in my world. Although it's interesting, you kind of see some people are like really kind of down in the mouth about goals. I don't know where the hell that came from. But goal pursuit is one of the most efficacious mental, emotional, and social skills. I would say as well too. Like imagery is a huge one. So that's really this idea of, daydreaming on purpose. So your brain doesn't understand the difference between what's real and what's perceived. So how to create a vivid enough image and simulate in your mind of yourself making a great play over and over again, or how do you see yourself, when you don't make a good play, bouncing back from that and moving forward. And I get really deep on that to where something I learned from my time in the CP, where I create very detailed imagery scripts that walk through a player's, pregame routine all the way through their first series. And so I've worked with players, simulating their whole game in their mind. And what's cool is you can speed that up and you can slow that down. It could be something to where you're looking at in your mind's eye game tape of what you just did to assess your performance to help you get ready to go do something, even to like, hey, right before I go do something and see myself making a play before I actually make it. And so when you hear people about having deja vu moments, it's kind of one of those things where it's like they've seen it in their mind before it actually happens. That's what deja vu is really all about. So imagery's another huge one as well too. And then, which I think you'd be interested in, this is the emotional regulation piece, right? Is control my how do I control my physiology and my emotions, with under stress and pressure, right? So how do I manage my energy levels, right? And I think understanding energy, your capacity to do work, there's a multimodal component to that, but it's mental, emotional, physical, social, spiritual. And when I say energy, it goes down to like fundamentally like, hey, it has to do with your glucose and oxygen. And so I think when you understand, how where my energy levels are at certain points in time, as I get ready to go do something or not do something, I think that understanding the breath, understanding sleep, understanding deliberate recovery, gratitude, there's a ton of, so each of these things I'm talking about has a million applications and they're very contextual, but like I just gave you, those are the big five right there. So those are just five of a whole menu of skills that I have in my bag. They're like clubs in my bag when I show up on the course with an athlete, and then it's a matter of customizing it, right? So it's like, okay, so meeting the player where they're at on that bridge and then helping them get where they need to go. And doing that in a way to where I'm bringing it to life. It's not talk therapy. It's like I try to be actionable as possible, and you can be actionable with very simple things and activities. That try to get out of the office, that use the space, within their work wherever they're working at. It could be on the sideline, it could be in the gym, it could be in the training room without being a distraction. But you're trying to bring to life these intangible attributes so they experience it. Because when you experience it, you see it and you feel it, and you can see the results, you're more likely to develop that habit to where you're going to practice them. And what's cool about the mental game is that you don't need a field. You can get as many sets and reps as possible and really change your neural pathways. And you do it 24/7, 365, even when you sleep. That's what's really cool about the mental game.
Amazing. Andy, I love those tools. Thanks a million for sharing those. You know, because that's something too that I have found in this EQ space. Even for me, actually, this is kind of why I'm so big on the tools. The project application is when I was starting my own journey and I had zero EQ, I had no self awareness, I had zero self. I was literally a 40-year-old emotional 5-year old, right? Adult. I was having adult temper tantrums. I had
I can
zero,
relate to that. I can
bro.
relate. Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
telling you, I was clueless. And so, what when I would hear these people say, "Well, Noble, you just need to, just sit with your emotions." I'm like, I don't even know what that means, bro. Like, what does that mean? Sit with my emotions. Like,
Yeah,
I need tools, man. I need something that I can sink
that's
my
right.
teeth into. So also, as an entrepreneur, I, I love the I love the philosophical and the conceptual and stuff. But at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, dude, it's got to transform behavior and
That's
outcomes,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Because I'm feeding my family with this stuff. So like I
Yeah.
need real so for my own self. So like I love the practical application. I mean, again, I also love the theoretical and stuff too. But
Right.
I at some point it's got to I
I
need
gotta
some
apply it. It's got to be
yes.
practical and tactical. Like,
I need
yeah,
I need EQ push-ups. I need EQ
that's right.
jumping jacks. I need what I'm saying?
What do you want me
Okay.
to do, coach? What do you want me to do, coach? As everybody wants to know. What do you want
Yes.
me to do? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So kind of last question here. And I'm gonna ask you kind of how do we follow
Yeah.
you and how do we find you and stuff like that, connect with you. Um, what is the connection? What is the connection or importance of EQ
Yeah.
in regards to optimal human performance?
Yeah. It's a great question. Because I think it's the EQ is really about the competencies in which the mental and emotional and social skills are applied. Right. And so when people say, well, how do I know if I'm if I'm mentally tough or mentally tougher. Well, the benchmark is really has to do with, so like we'll pick one, right? So let's talk about self-talk, right? For example, it's a common one. So at first, again, like, and I call it the in my language, this is kind of my fancy packaging of the same thing. It's the thermostat. So a thermostat, has a built-in thermometer and it has the built-in controls, right? So I say, you have to have the thermometers, your awareness of yourself, of how you think, awareness of how you think and how you respond to different situations, and you're aware of others around you and your environment. You're aware of your environment, you're aware of others, so on and so forth. And you're aware, and then there's the self-regulation is what I control, which is I have a graphic has the A and the B button on the thermostat. You only control your A and B button. That's all I control. That's it. Everything else is then influence, which is the third last competency, which is it's that inside out approach. Is that okay? So if I can control if I'm aware of how I think and how I respond, I'm more likely to control how I think and how I respond, which then from an outside perspective, then if I'm more aware of myself, I'm more aware of my surroundings and other people, I'm more likely to be more empathetic and compassionate and do something about it to influence others, right? So I think so for example, like just start with self-talk. Well, everything begins with awareness, so that's where everything begins. Okay. So I have to be aware of how my self-talk works. Why do I care? Okay, I talk to myself. Great. Well, why is how I talk to myself matter? Well, I understand that thought performance relationship that I just described to you when I first started, right? It's psychological momentum. I understand that, hey, we say 50 to 60,000 words to ourselves every single day, and some research shows that 80% of those is a negative. And so if what you're doing is feeding yourself negative self-talk, how's that affecting your performance? You're essentially flushing yourself down the toilet. It becomes you're writing your own story before you publish it, right? So I think understanding that is really key. Okay, well then what do I do about it? Well, do I just think positive? No, that's not how that works at all either. Now I'm understanding so one of the things I first do is I want you to spend some time, and there's some apps for that, but like I want you to log how you think. Like I just want you to spend a week logging how you think, and is it helping you or hurting you? That's it. So you got to give awareness, because if awareness is 50% of the battle from my standpoint. So once I'm aware of it, and I'm aware of what it is, why it's important, it's the what, the so what, the now what. Now I actually can do something about it, right? Because I understand the impact. Now I can bring in things like, all right, there's the 4 P's of self-talk. Is it personal? Is it powerful? Is it, purposeful? Is it in the present tense, right? So those are the criteria. So now I can be deliberate about how I talk to myself. Okay, well, now situations. Now my self-talk looks like a traffic light. I don't always want to be positive, right? Because our negative self-talk, the red light thinking, that's how we're built. We're designed that way. It's designed to protect us. You don't ever want to turn off that negative thinking. And some research suggests that even it helps keep you grounded a little bit, right? It helps keep you humble and hungry, right? So you don't want to turn off negative thinking, and positive thinking isn't always helpful either, because it's like Pollyannish. Optimism isn't always the way either, because when you just got punched in the mouth on, as an entrepreneur, and you're like, I don't know how to freaking, I'm going to pay my bills. You're like, positive thinking ain't going to freaking help you. But there's somewhere in the middle, there's this thing called neutral thinking, is yellow light thinking. Okay. Well, I don't want to be green. So it's like, how do I shift into neutral, like my car, so how do I move from negative to being more objective to where I can push back for a second? That's what your friend was trying to tell you with, okay, how do I identify how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling? How do I accept that for what it is? And then how do I shift to the next best step, and then the next best step, and the next best step? And then when I get out of that shitstorm, then maybe I can move to green light, go thinking when it's appropriate. But in the moment, when I just got freaking punched in the mouth, and like I just got blown up by an IED and freaking, or I just got shot at and blown up, like PMA, positive mental attitude, ain't freaking helping me, right? As a matter of fact, it could probably hurt me. So I've given you tools. I just gave you a tool to like, hey, now I can identify I'm aware of my self-talk. Now I can tame it. I can put it in a category. This thinking is negative, it's red. This thinking is positive, it's helpful, right? I never heard of neutral thinking, but now I can kind of like figure that out and change my brain patterns. Now that I understand it in the situation, before an event, during an event, after an event, I can practice that intentionally, on purpose, with purpose. Right now, I can actually change. That's through self-regulation. I can change the neural structure of my brain. I literally am training my brain to become a dominant pattern of thinking, that replaces the old pattern, right? And now moving the other competencies, now I'm more aware. And now because I'm aware of myself, control myself. Guess what? I am way more likely to be empathetic, right? And I'm like, when I ask you, hey, what's up? How you doing, man? Check it in, and like your body language is screaming, like this dude's something wrong. This guy's something off. Most of the time, like, and not because we're bad people, we just like they're like, yeah, I'm doing all right, and their body language is screaming, I'm struggle bus. Now, because you are more aware of how you think, and then now you're more likely to check in, you're more likely to press and be like, hey man, what's going on? Like, in a way, like I'm going that bridge. Hey man, are you surviving, coping, or thriving, man? What's going on? And you can actually check in, and then on top of that, you can move it to the next level thing. Like, hey man, what 1 through 10. I'm not. You're never probably ever gonna do this with a buddy, but I do this in my practice, right? I'm a 5. Well, what can you do? What can we do in this next session together? Hey, we're having coffee together or whatever. Or like, hey, what can you do today, right now, to move from a 5 to a 6? And what can I do to help you move to a 5 to a 6? Man, now we're moving the needle, because now we're more compassionate. Now we've moved from sympathy to empathy to compassion. Now we're truly transformational servant leaders, and that kind of brings it all together in my mind. So if you want to be a great leader, you got to freaking everything else starts with awareness, then it goes to regulation, then it goes to, outer awareness, then it goes to influence, right? And leadership is ultimately all about influence, but let's reverse engineer what that looks like. And if you run for me, measuring your competence of your mental toughness really is a framework to do that, is EQ.
Oh, man. Bro, bro, this is incredible. I cannot wait to go back through this episode, man. So stoked. Okay, how do we follow you, find you? How do we get your resources? All that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So my company, even though I'm working with the Bears, my company is still chugging along too. So my company is designed to perform. A big thing that I'm pushing right now is my keynote speaking. And so, hey, if you're looking for a keynote speech, for whether it's virtual, in person, my signature topic is forging mental toughness, training your brain to win from within. Hoping to have a TEDx talk here at the fall. Cross our fingers and toes. So more to follow on that too. So that's my signature talks. I'm doing a lot of that right now too. Next thing to push is had a book project come out that I am really honored to co-author. I'm on the board of AQR International. And so they're a company that really, they're the leaders in the art and science of mental toughness. And we wrote a book. It's called Who Cares Wins, which is a play on, if you're familiar with the Special Air Service, the SAS, which are British commandos, their motto is "Who dares wins," which is kind of cool. That's actually what we one of the things Bob Sutton, my old coach at Army, brought in for our special teams awards. It was a SAS motto with the dagger in the wings, and "Who dares wins" was kind of the motto there too. So, who cares wins. It's leadership practices for the 21st century. So it really brings together, think about this as mental toughness for leaders and teams. And it's a really unique, diverse group of people in different industries from all over the world that to come together for this project. So be sure to check that out. You can find that on Amazon. You should have an Audible or audiobook version of that coming out. You can get a hard copy, soft copy, wherever you get books. Social media wise, my Kung Fu is probably the strongest on LinkedIn. So check me out there. I'm pretty active as far as pushing out articles, content, at least on a weekly basis as well too, to be able to do that. Check me out there. Also, I'm on Instagram in at coach_Riise. You can find me and follow me there. It's a private account, but you reach out to me and mention EQ Gangster. Love to put stuff out there as well too. I think the last thing I'd like to promote is my podcast, which Noble, I can't wait to have you on as a guest. So we just, recorded our first series, and we're getting ready to publish it. And so more to follow. It's called Skull Sessions for Mental Mastery, the art and science of kicking ass between the ears. So check out Skull Sessions, the podcast with my really good friend and business colleague, Nate Last. And of course, how you found us was through our book project with Jason Van Camp, Sarah Spradlin, other guests. We wrote the book Deliberate Discomfort together, how special operations forces dare to win and overcome fear and dare to win by getting comfortable being uncomfortable, which is you can see my little sign up here too, which is something that's really big on special operations. And so you can check that book out as well too. And that's kind of the connecting point here as well too. So those are the things that I'm working on right now. On top of trying to turn the original NFL franchise around and win some games with the #1 overall NFL draft pick. I'm super excited to be a part of that storied franchise and turning the culture around. And we're doing that brick by brick.
Andy, dude, thank you so much. So grateful for you sharing your insights and your wisdom with me and with the audience. Super excited to get this out, man. Thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Noble. Appreciate you. Yeah, and see you in the arena. Beat Navy.